I'll start over. I was muted. It is time now to call this April 20th, 2020 regular board meeting of the Board of Trustees of the San Felipe Del Rio CISD to order. This meeting is being conducted by video conference in accordance with the governor's authorization concerning suspension of certain open meeting law requirements for COVID-19 coronavirus disaster. Madam Secretary, Ms. Gonzalez, would you do us the honor of calling roll?
Thank you. Y'all don't read lips, huh? Okay. Mr. Contreras?
Present.
Ms. Guanajuato Red? Ms. Haynes? Ms. Vanessa? Mr. Oberfeld? Mr. Smith? Myself. Sir, we have a quorum.
Some mics might be muted, so want to make sure that we can hear everyone. Let the record show that we do have a quorum of board members and that this meeting has been duly called in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Before we have opening ceremonies, I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Rios for a special honor.
Thank you, Mr. Mesa. This is our first board meeting since Coach Polanco passed away, and if it's okay with the board, I'd like to read something and dedicate this moment of silence to him. Manuel Polanco Jr., age 77, passed away on Sunday, April 5th, 2020 in San Antonio, Texas. Coach Polanco began his teaching career with the San Felipe Independent School District in 1965 as a science teacher and coach. He served his beloved San Felipe district for 7 years until consolidation. After consolidation and throughout his next 31 years, Coach Polanco served the San Felipe Del Rio CISD in many roles, including head basketball coach for Del Rio Rams, science teacher, PE health teacher, and assistant coach in most sports. Coach Polanco was a strong proponent of our youth. Those of us, myself included, who knew Coach Polanco, will forever be grateful because he instilled in us a belief that everything was possible regardless of your background, ethnicity, or economic situation. It didn't matter if anybody else in our inner circle had been successful. For those of us who were blessed with his presence, it only mattered that he welcomed us into his inner circle and that he believed in us. Mr. Manuel Polanco will always be remembered as one of the most beloved Ram coaches for his strong support and advocacy for our school district students and athletes. We miss him more than words can express.
Thank you very much, sir. At this time, we will have opening ceremonies, first with a moment of silence for personal reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. At this time, we'll go on our agenda. Item 5, citizens to be heard. We have no one signed up for citizens. We have a report. Item 8, COVID-19 school closure. Dr. Rios.
Today, I only want to report on a couple of matters. As we all know, the governor of the state of Texas has continued to direct that schools remain closed, but that we continue with our home-based instructional program. Therefore, for the remainder of the school year, we will continue with our home-based instructional program. We will begin serving meals. I do want to just alert the board in advance. This 6 weeks that just passed, this grading period, we reported a total of 5,719 grades as incomplete. Now, granted, this could be one student that had 6 incompletes. Incompletes are equal to an F. Students got an incomplete because they would have otherwise received an F. The previous 6 weeks, we only had 1,866. And then on the third 6 weeks, we only had 1,707. So we continue with the home-based instruction. But what's going to end up happening is that these incompletes will become identifications for summer school. And if students do not complete the work, then everybody needs to know that the expectation is that grades continue and the student will fail the class. I know that the situation is difficult. We will do all that we can by continuing to provide an opportunity for students to complete the courses over the summer. But it will be an F once the school year is over, and then the students will have the opportunity to switch that F to a passing grade, but they'll have to continue to work over the summer. It's a difficult situation, but that is where we are today. It is a significantly larger number of failing grades. Granted, it could be tremendously worse, but that's what we have right now. Now, this report that I shared with you is just in classes that count for high school credit, 8th grade through 12th grade, with most of, obviously very few of them being seniors. They want to graduate, but it's still a significant amount. The judge today informed us or reminded us that his executive order will expire today, but he's going to reissue the order with some modifications. But by and large, it remains the same. Our employees continue to work from home. We are providing incentive pay for those that are required to come in, and the amount of the pay is 1.5 times. And it's primarily the cafeteria workers, the bus drivers, and security, with limited professionals in other areas that have to come in and help prepare homework packages or just do work that has got to get done to pay bills and continue to run the district. Or if there are no questions for the COVID-19, that's my only report.
Yes, I'd like to remind board members, if you do have a question, do raise your hand so we can have technology unmute your microphone. But in the meantime, Dr. Rios, I know that the Commissioner of Education, Mr. Mike Murat, is going to have a presentation later on this week. And we continue to see that superintendents are doing their report as well. I saw one that is starting on every Monday at noon, and this is from superintendents and board members addressing this very issue that we're discussing tonight. Do you know exactly when the commissioner will be giving us more information?
The superintendents have a conference call with the commissioner tomorrow. I believe it's 3 p.m. I know that's when he updates us, usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I'm assuming that it'll be then, but as soon as I hear something, I'll definitely inform board members that if necessary, put out a press release if it's something that the larger community has to be made aware of very quickly.
I'm going to open it up for questions from board members. Mr. Smith?
So this 5,719 missing assignments, how does that stack up to other districts?
It's difficult to say, Mr. Smith, because I've checked with a couple of other districts. Just today, I had a conversation with the superintendent just from Eagle Pass. We've become close through all of this, and they have different expectations for their students versus us. They have, if I'm quoting him correctly, he indicated that they're requiring 1 assignment per week. We're requiring 2 assignments per week. I don't think it's a whole lot to require 2 assignments. I think it's a lot less than what the students would have otherwise been completing had they been in school. So there isn't any comparison as of yet. Also, most districts started 3 weeks after we started with a home-based instructional program. They weren't prepared to begin, so they've gone at this less.
So the other question is related to us as a district. In our ratings, how is it going to impact? Do they have any idea how they're going to do our ratings as we run through the year as a district?
The commissioner has already decided that there will not be any accountability ratings, no A through F ratings for this school year. There is no accountability, and the federal government has agreed to waive their accountability. Now, as far as other ratings, I think it'll impact in years to come. I know that Ms. Hernandez and myself worked on a presentation that's going to be presented later on today as far as providing resolutions through TASB to suspend accountability and ratings beyond this year.
Mr. Overfeld had a question.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mesa. Dr. Rios, out of that 5,700, is that including the students who are in our ECHS who are actually dual credit students, whether it's with SWTJC or Angelo or UT on ramps? Because I know we don't report grades on a 6 weeks basis. There we do one at midterm, and then we'll do one here in 3.5 weeks for the final there. So are the counselors reaching out to the colleges to see where the students stand who are taking those classes?
This report, Mr. Overfeld, only reflects grades that we actually have in our grade book. So it will not reflect grades from dual credit courses. However, we will have the counselors follow up on it, see if there's an indication if students are lagging behind. But I know that a lot of the counselors are already having those conversations. So I think providing a response will be fairly easy. I just need to check up on them.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Contreras?
Yes, sir. Dr. Rios, of the 57 or the number that missing assignments, how many of those were actually emailed or sent by mail that were missing? Do we have a number on that?
No, sir. We don't have a number. These are the number I shared with you all, the 5,700 are grades that are not complete. And again, it could be one student missing multiple assignments in multiple classes. But these do not reflect individual assignments, rather individual grades.
Ms. Gonzalez had a question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Out of the 50, can you hear me, sir? Can you hear me? The 5,700 that you mentioned, are those, you know who these other ones were, the 1,876, 1,866, and said, are they all, they're all included in this number, same students?
Well, the pool is from the same students, but the 1,800 failing grades were from the 4th 6 weeks. So my intent was just to indicate that the number of kids failing was significantly higher, almost 3 times as high as it was in the 4th 6 weeks.
But are they the same students that haven't been turned into since?
I think just because of the way that we know student behavior, I would venture to say that a lot of the 1,800 are some of the same students, but there's obviously a lot more additional students that had not otherwise failed before because the number is so much higher.
Right, that's right. And this is a combination of online and mail-in, or how does?
Yes, ma'am.
Both?
It includes all the students and all the venues that we've been reaching out to them.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Webb?
Do you know how many of these are seniors?
Ma'am, I don't have the exact number, but the report that they used to formulate this report for me would have had it by a senior class. I will try to get an answer to you before the end of the day, before we leave the meeting.
Thank you.
Anyone else with questions? Then we will move on. I know that Dr. Rios, there's other questions, but right now we're talking about grades in general. I know later on we'll discuss, for example, referrals to certain programs, whether it's speech, dyslexia, GT, and so forth, so that we can be in coordination with what TEA is suggesting. Yes, Dr. Rios?
Just in closing, for this, I want to reiterate and emphasize to anyone who may be listening or the news media outlets that may make reports, students who do not complete the assignments will end up getting failing grades. There is not a free pass for the semester. The expectation is that students complete their assignments. Now, we're willing to work with them and help them out through summer school, but if they don't complete it, we cannot use the excuse that that we were in crisis. I wanted to make that clear. Thank you, Mr. Mesa.
Ms. Webb, one final question.
I just have one more question. So if the student is getting an incomplete, the teachers are inputting an incomplete, or are they inputting a 0?
Right now, they've inputted an incomplete, but at a certain point, the incomplete is going to become whatever the actual grade would have been. So maybe not a 0, but whatever the grade averages to as a failing grade.
Okay, and that is automatically going to be posted, or the teacher has to go back and correct that?
No, the teachers have to go back and correct the incompletes manually. It does create more work for the teachers.
Thank you.
Mr. Contreras?
Just out of curiosity, Dr. Rios, does the teacher know what's working best with the student, as far as communicating by email or communicating through the mail, as far as receiving assignments to combat those missing assignments or missing grades? Do we know what kids are by email or by mail? Just out of curiosity.
No, I don't have it broken down by that, but I can assure you that based on the conversations that we have had with students through their case managers, it isn't a matter of them not receiving the assignments. It's a matter of students not completing them. Now, if a student needs additional help, we have made every effort to have tutors available for them, homework help online. It's just really a matter of students not completing the assignments.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Hearing none, we move on to the next item on our agenda. Our next item is the consent agenda. Again, one action will approve all items on the consent agenda. At this time, if you would look through, there's minutes from previous board meetings. There's bids, there's contracts, and I want to mention that donations will be posted on the website. For the sake of time, we will not call each the donations, but we do appreciate individuals and businesses, again, contributing to the district and to individual campuses that benefit all our students. I'll ask board members at this time if there's any item that needs to be pulled out, or if you have a question on any item on the consent agenda, to do so at this time. Hearing none, then I will ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda. Mr. Overfeld, second by Mr. Smith. All those in favor, beginning with Mr. Quadras, Mrs. Gonzalez, Ms. Webb, favor, Mr. Smith, favor, Amy Haynes, in favor, Mr. Overfeld, and myself. Motion is approved. Consent agenda is approved. We'd like to move 2 items up. There's some people that are waiting online. These are people from out of town. Item 12D, if you could go to item 12D. And if board members have any objection that we move this item up. And then item 15A, again, there's people that will be joining us from outside our area. Hearing no objections, we'll hear item 12D.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mesa, the item for 15A is already online. If we can proceed with item 15A.
Okay, move to 15A first. Okay, 15A, Student Services. Consideration to approve Memorandum of Understanding, MOU, with Texas Tech University Health Science Center, El Paso, to provide pediatric and adolescent behavioral health services via telehealth. Sandra Hernandez.
Good evening, Mr. Mesa, Board President Mesa, Dr. Rios, and members of the board. At this time, I'm going to introduce to you Dr. Sarah Martin. She is the Chief of the Division of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, CPAN and TCHAT Medical Director, and she's the Assistant Professor, Department of Psychiatry at Texas Tech University Health Science Center, El Paso. And I believe that she's in our waiting room area, and so we're going to introduce her.
Welcome.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so the reason I'm here tonight is that we're here to offer you all a program. The Texas State Legislature last cycle approved a lot of funding for child and adolescent psychiatric services for the whole state of Texas. So the funding is all going through the medical schools in Texas, the departments of psychiatry that have a child psychiatry division. And our part of Texas is all along the border all the way from Eagle Pass, all the way up to El Paso. So the program that is going, there's several different programs in the bill, but the one that affects you all is called TCHAT, Texas Child Health Access Through Telemedicine. Let's see, they brought the slides up, okay.
Yes.
I think the next slide. You go one more slide. There we go. Okay, so, and high-risk children are the focus of this this funding. Here, there's it's a brief intervention. It's the legislature set it at a maximum of 4 sessions because they wanted us to reach as many children as possible. We're mostly going to be focusing on teenagers, but as many students as possible. So there's a maximum of 4 sessions, but then at the end of those 4 sessions, we will work with a student's primary care provider or the local mental health authority in order to get continuity of care. So some kids can probably just go back to the pediatrician if it's a simple problem, but other kids may need a more complicated ongoing plan. And so we'll make sure that's in place at the end of the 4 sessions. That's just a little timeline. So it's we're about 2/3 into the first year and we're set to go. Next slide. So it was school shootings that brought all this attention to child psychiatry. All this money is attached to a school safety bill. And so part of it is has to do with security, and then this is the part that has to do with prevention. So this program is focusing on those at risk for illegal behavior, kids that already have been arrested, kids are in alternative schools, suspended, absent, especially if they're at risk of not graduating. And with all these problems, they have to have one of these types of problems, but also a psychiatric problem so that we can try and intervene. And it's not intended for those that are already in treatment. This is to reach kids that haven't even gotten started on their treatment. Next slide. This is a free program. It's paid for directly by the state. So insurance is not required. Schools will need to help us pick out the children that they want us to see, though. We're going to ask them to give us some information, a certain set of information about the students, and first of all, to get consent from the parents or the guardians, and then to provide us private space at your school where we can video in and see the kids. Next slide. Oh, can we go to, yeah, there we go. The space can be set up in many different ways. We're very flexible. We're going to start with the high schools in your area. A therapist will be doing the initial evaluation, and then there'll be several other sessions with a child psychiatrist if needed. And then we'll refer them back to other existing programs in your community. Next slide. This is just for anyone that's and has exposure to mental health. These are just some forms that are all one page that we're going to ask. Some of them are for teachers, some are from parents, and some the kid themselves fills in. But they're all just one page, so we're not putting too much of a burden on the person, on the family, and the teachers that are getting care of the kids that's getting care. Next slide. And we hope to get this information from the schools so that we can get as far as we can in those 4 sessions. And so we know exactly the sort of problems the kids been having in school. Next slide. And then at the end, we're going to write up a treatment plan, and we'll work with local resources in order to make sure that the kids will have ongoing treatment. Next slide.
I think that is the last slide.
Oh, is that it? Okay, so the next step is for you guys to ask questions, and if you are interested in the program, then we have an MOU that we have sent down to the district. And we started out planning this for starting next school year, but then all of this crazy stuff happened. So we actually have our staff in place. And so some of the schools are asking if we can start services even earlier and directly into the patient's homes through video teleconferencing. So we are gearing up to do that if you all would like.
Questions? Mr. Overfeld has a question.
Yes, thank you for the information. I know that several of us, Mr. Mesa being one, have voiced, the importance, especially of mental health as it's coming down the line, especially with what the legislature's done recently in a lot of the sessions that we've attended at several of the conferences on mental health. In the presentation, you said it would be implemented at the high schools, or in our case, the high school that we have. Is it only available at the high school level at this time, or is there plans to eventually be able to, at some point, be able to go into junior high and elementary? Because I know if we can catch them much earlier, those that are having some stressor issues and psychiatric issues, we can help get ahead of the curve there. So I don't know if that was.
Yes, that is in the plan. Really, our limiting factor is child psychiatrists. So, but there's other parts of the same bill that is funding us to increase the workforce. Of course, that takes a little while, but even for next year, we're going to be graduating. Let's see, or even for this summer, we're going to be, with the help of the state of Texas from a previous bill, we're going to be graduating twice as many psychiatrists from our program as we were before. So we are hoping that this will be a permanent program and that it will continue to get larger. But we're always going to be limited by the number of child psychiatrists.
Well, I appreciate it, and I like the idea, and I look forward to what the other members have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Orfeld. Mr. Contreras has a question.
Yes, thank you for all the help and being here, Dr. Martin. But it's just along the lines of Mr. Orfeld. You know, is there anything we can do as a school district to start identifying these kids at a lower level, and then, you know, hopefully not have them reach the high school, but we can identify them at a lower level. You know, what can we do to help them as a district, you know, to make the transition into that high school, you know, and to, you know, give you some help or the program some help.
Yes, well, we definitely do want to expand into the younger grades. And part of the program also is going to be educational. And we have a lot of licensed professional counselors that are going to offer you all different sessions on different interventions, that can be implemented in the schools, as well as education about different psychiatric problems. Because a lot of times I think that kids don't get identified early enough because people don't understand that actually that is the problems the kid is having are not that they're a bad kid. It's just that they have a psychiatric problem. And so hopefully that would get treatment sooner. And this program will just be one way to get treatment. Another way that we're working on in the community is we are also going to have a program to support primary care providers. And so let's say that a parent goes to a session that we do on ADHD and they're like, oh my gosh, my kid, he has ADHD. Well, then they can go to their primary care provider and we can help that primary care provider. They can call us and then we can help them get the medication started, titrate it to the point where it would be helpful to the kid. And a lot of times you take a kid who is really frustrated, doesn't even want to try to learn, into a student that gets B's and maybe an occasional A. So we would hope to do, the early intervention will probably be more through the primary care providers, because the legislature is really concerned with this group of kids. And that list of things that we're focusing on, the problems that the kids have, that's straight from the bill. So we do, we do have to meet that. But this other part of the program and the educational part, where we're going to be educating teachers, parents, and your staff, if you'd like, is another way that we could get kids doing well sooner, earlier in life.
Dr. Martin, I just want to thank you again for providing these services. I know our counselors are overwhelmed with the work that they do, and this is a program that certainly will be utilized, and I'm glad that Texas Tech is offering this for our district. Anyone else have a question? I know this is an action item. We'll have Sandra. Will you present the recommendation, please?
Yes, sir. It is the recommendation of the administration to approve, to authorize the superintendent to approve the memorandum of understanding with Texas Tech University Health Science Center, El Paso, to provide pediatric and adolescent behavioral health services via telehealth.
You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion for approval? Ms. Amy Haynes, seconded by Mr. Overfeld. All those in favor? Starting with Mr. Contreras, favor. Mrs. Gonzalez? Mrs. Webb? In favor. Mr. Smith? In favor. Amy Haynes? In favor. Josh Overfelt, in favor. Myself, in favor. This is approved unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me. And you all are our first school district that we're starting the program with. So anything that we need to improve along the way, just let us know. But thanks so much for not forgetting about the program during everything that's going on recently.
Thank you very much.
I can't wait to get down there and see you guys in person.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Thank you, Mr. Mesa.
Thank you so much.
At this time, we will go to item 12D. Again, we have someone that will be joining us. 12D is consideration to approve the schematic design documents with Go Eero International LLC for the new elementary school campus. Mr. Henge.
I'll make the, Mr. Mesa, if it's okay, I'll make the introduction.
Okay.
Mr. Mesa, as part of our approval process for large construction projects, the board approves the schematic design, which then leads them to start working on the construction documents, which is a much more extensive process. Then the board will approve the construction documents before we put them out for bid. Then the board will approve the contractor that wins the bid, and finally, a final contract that reflects any type of changes to the project due to value engineering. This is the first phase for the new elementary. So we are going to hand it over to Mr. Octavio Cantu and the rest of the ERO team to make the presentation. After a brief introduction from Mr. Cantu, I'll ask Sandra to bring up the presentation. Now, Mr. Cantu, every time you want the slide changed, just say next slide and Sandra will make that change, okay?
Right.
Okay, so if it's okay, Mr. Mesa, I'll turn it over to Mr. Cantu.
Yes, sir.
Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Rios, good evening. I hope everyone's doing well. Like Dr. Rios mentioned, we're here to present the schematic design package for the new Del Rio Elementary School. Before we get started, I'd just like to very quickly say we've had input from Dr. Rios, his team. We've reviewed the layout and the floor plan and the program spaces with several principals.
It would look like this as a PDF.
And we've received input also from food service with the development of the kitchen and the layout. So with that, I think we can go ahead and just kind of give you all a brief overview of the floor plan. It looks like we may be having some technical problems, if I'm judging videos correctly.
We have a little delay for technical difficulties.
Yes, it appears so.
Please bear with us.
No problem. It's still pretty amazing what we're able to do remotely and with some of the technologies that are out there. So it's fortunate that we have that opportunity to share this with y'all, despite everything else that's ongoing.
It's been a learning experience. You know, we start our meetings and my mic is muted.
It happens. You'll be talking halfway into your conversation and you realize, oh, it's muted. Let me start all over.
Dr. Rios.
And if y'all are having trouble bringing it up, if they'll make me the host, I can share my screen.
For that particular document.
Can Reno make me the host? No? Okay, thank you.
Is it a good offer, Dr. Rios?
Okay, let me call that up.
You look like the host from that game show there for a moment.
Well, I think it's the actual document that's giving us a hard time. So it probably wasn't anything that they were doing over there. It's a document that's difficult to share. So give us a second while we work through this. Okay, there you go. Is my screen visible to everyone?
Yes.
Thumbs up. Okay, Octavio, if you can begin, and I'll switch screens as you indicate, okay?
Okay. What we have in front of us here, or what's in front on your screen, that's just a very preliminary kind of idea for the elevation of the elementary school. It's modeled a little after Memorial Middle School. It may have a new name now. We kind of found it to be called Memorial Middle School. But we've taken elements from that and kind of interpreted them and applied them to the elevation and the look of the school. And we'll be working on a rendering to formalize this once we get schematic design approved for the floor plan and we know it's not moving around. We'll go ahead and formalize this and get y'all a really nice rendering for the next presentation. We go to the next page. Our focus has primarily been on the layout and of the floor plan and the allocation of the spaces and how they're organized. So we've worked with Dr. Rios' team, food service, like I mentioned earlier, to go over a lot of the different spaces, the quantity of spaces, the size of the spaces. They're modeled after Garfield. A lot of the spaces are very usable there, and it's what everybody's accustomed to. So that was the basis from which we proceeded. And just to orient you all real quick, if you all see right in the center of the screen at the top, there's the word vestibule. So we've got a secured entry coming into the school where everybody that visits the school there would have to go into the reception prior to get into the rest of the school. And everything right there behind the reception, kind of in that same color, is what we would call administration. So we have our assistant principal, our clinic, conference room, the art, the principal, the vault, the counselor, the parent room. It's kind of off the back corridor, but it's still located up in that immediate area. And then we have the lounge, or one of the lounges. And then to the other side of the main entry is the dining commons, or the cafeteria. So that's where the children would eat. And then we have the stage for presentations. And then behind that, we've got the serving lines in the kitchen. You'll notice the equipment here isn't shown. There's some modifications that were made based on input that we received just late last week that has already been completed, but wasn't ready in time to present here. So we're working through that. Then we have that corridor, 217, that kind of goes across there. From there down, we're kind of getting into the classroom side of things. You'll notice there's 4 corridors off of that main corridor, and they have a pair of double doors to kind of close them off. So we kind of have the more public side, and then we have the classroom side down at the bottom. And before I move into that, you'll notice to the right of the administration area is the library and its associated spaces. Right there in that kind of pinkish color. And then we've got 6 kindergarten classrooms, each with their individual restroom, kind of in that gray color, clustered down that corridor. And then we kind of go clockwise from there. We'll go over to first grade in the green, off to the right. So we'll have the first grade corridor, and then we go across to the second grade corridor, which is kind of that bluish greenish color. And then we move down a little bit. Then we kind of go into that kind of fleshy color, which is third grade. The gym sits at the end, attached to the building, so it's not detached. The children do not have to go outside to get to the gym. They're able to kind of go down those two corridors that you see there between the third grades and between the computer and science. So they have indoor access to it. The gym will also be used for drop-off. Given the state of the property, I think it's a little bit more cemented now. Once that's finalized, we'll go ahead and develop the site and the drop-offs around this floor plan. But the intent is to use the gym as a holding area for when the kids are dropped off. They can come into the gym prior to going into the school. If we continue kind of clockwise, at 6 o'clock there, we've got science, art, computer and music in that one quarter. And then we continue across into 4th grade, and then we'll complete the loop. Or I'm sorry, we move 5th grade down, closer to that back exterior, and then we put 4th grade at the top. So that kind of gives you all just a real kind of quick overview of the floor plan. If you notice, we have 2 primary horizontal or east-west corridors. If somebody kind of stands in the middle, they're easy to observe and to monitor. And then we have very clean circulation in the north-south direction also. So the idea is to facilitate, walking and navigating the plan, particularly for the children. They're all kind of contained within their own corridor. So they kind of have like a home corridor that they can go to help facilitate that. And other than that, I mean, this is kind of the culmination of everybody's input. It isn't where we started. But we have gone through different versions of this, and this is ultimately, I think, what addressed everybody's input. So with that, I'll open up to questions if anybody has anything that they'd like to ask.
Mr. Smith?
So, Mr. Cantu, thank you for the presentation.
Yes, sir.
I've got a few things from my perspective, and I don't know what other board members. I know you're saying that that front facade is kind of a generic start. Kind of got that traditional look to it. Maybe I don't know where everybody else is at, but maybe if we're looking at something maybe a little bit more modern looking, I'm not sure, but probably where I've got the bigger issues would be inside that administrative area.
Yes, sir.
To me, that looks very boxed, very silo-ish, where everybody's got dark corners to go into and no real connection for interaction inside that administrative office area. It just looks like a bunch of hallways and closed-in offices. To me, if my vote would be to go, the overall site layout with the hallways and like is generically okay by me, but that area specifically just looks like boxed in and not conducive to a productive environment. And that's just looking at the layout. It may all be in glass for all I know, but it doesn't look. It just looks boxed in, right? And private. And I'd like to see it more open and productive looking. The other thing that I would note is the location of the restrooms. It looks like you've got the larger restrooms kind of boxed into the back end of the facility. And I'm wondering, when you have the event time, that event time is either going to be up in the cafeteria most likely, and the parents and stuff like that. So I'm wondering if you took and maybe that restroom that's on the far left, and you swap that with that 4th grade classroom kind of area, where you've got kind of a large restroom on that quadrant of the building for those event nights. But you know, those are just ideas that I've got after reviewing what you've done. So, and then it would also be good to understand how all of this ties together with student drop off and parking and that kind of thing. Even considering just a generic walk, right? Whatever. So that's all I've got as far as questions at the moment. And thank you so much. Good job.
Thank you, and I do appreciate your input. And some of the comments that you made were definitely something that was discussed as we developed the plan. I think at one point the restroom on the left was located to the north, kind of as you mentioned would probably be a preferable layout there at fourth grade number 65. But they felt, and I'm just paraphrasing through the conversation that we had with staff and with principals, that it served primarily the students for the majority of the time, and it was a preferable location to have it to the south. It is not difficult to move it up to the top at this point. We can have that conversation with Dr. Rios and the team again. And then the administration area, that's probably the third or fourth layout of it. And it's the amount of openness and the glass that you mentioned, we can discuss. And Dr. Rios, and I don't know if you have any comments with regards to that.
Dr. Rios?
Yes, just to be a little bit more specific, first on the restroom, because obviously the principals that we talked with wanted a third restroom for the very same reason that Mr. Smith is talking about. But when we counted the number of students and the number of fixtures that would be required, you can see this spot down here, Mr. Smith, at the bottom, that's a blank.
Yep.
We could add a restroom up here and have that third restroom they talked about, except that then we increase the square footage and does the cost. But from an operational view, to have these students have an accessible restaurant, just like these students up at the top, then putting it at the center was the easiest way. Now, again, we can go back and add square footage, move the classrooms down to that spot there at the bottom. I don't know if you all are able to see my mouse as I'm moving it around.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So there's this blank spot here. So we could very easily shift these classrooms down and put a restroom up here. But again, we increase the cost. And as far as the office layout goes, the only way to make the office, I guess, more visible to have open windows would be to shift it from this area, maybe make it latitude to have more access to the windows, and then have the library have less access to the windows. So that's certainly doable to have more. I'm
not necessarily saying more access to the outside world, but access to each other. That just looks boxed in to me. It looks like you got to go through different doors and hallways just to talk to the principal. And
okay, well,
to see what's going on inside the work environment.
Yes, sir. So here was the idea. The idea is that here's a reception area, and it also serves as a waiting area for students that are trying to go into the clinic or trying to go in to see the assistant principal, which is where the students would most frequently go. And then as far as for parents, again, here is the reception area. And when they come to meetings, just steps away is the conference room and the ARD room where most of the meetings are had. Now the principal is a little bit hidden towards the bottom here, but the assistant principal isn't. And again, they went through various renditions because we did want to make it have the most accessibility to the reception area. And that's what we came up with. This is just, again, very similar to what Garfield Elementary currently has. And it's just trying to get the most out of limited square footage. I don't know if there's any other things that could be done, Octavio, but this is probably the fourth rendition with the idea of having access to the assistant principal and the conference rooms when parents come to meetings.
And I think you summarized it very well. The idea was to kind of keep the principal a little bit more private, so that they had a checks and balances as they traveled through the administration, and to give the public or the parents visiting the school more direct access to the conference room, without having them go into the heart of the administration, or as deep into the administration, and also have the clinic up front. In the event that somebody needed to be picked up or had to go to the nurse's clinic. It can be open some with windows and glass. We can discuss that to that interior corridor. It does look like there's a lot of doors there, but the doors are primarily to single function of rooms. For example, if you go down that circulation corridor, you go directly to the principal's office or into the conference room. The other door in the conference room was just to give the principal direct access in the event that they needed it. The yard has one door directly off of the hallway. The principal has one door off of the hallway, and then the counselor. The parent is outside the administration, so they don't have to be inside the administration area. And then the lounge is also off of the outside of the administration corridor. More direct access to the teachers.
Mr. Cantu.
Yes, sir.
Brain Mesa. I'm glad that you're using the principals for input, because normally they're the ones that would look at their campus and see what the needs are and then address it, with a new facility. But one thing that always comes up, and we're always short of, is faculty restrooms. Would you point those out?
Yes, sir. Well, if we start in the admin area, there's one immediately off of that center corridor, and that one can serve the staff, or if a parent needs to go to a restroom, so that one's right there. We have one immediately off of the lounge, just south of that, inside the lounge. We have one in the library resource, up at the top right there. We have one in the planning lounge, that other orange area right there. And then if you go down that corridor, there's two other restrooms. And Mr. Smith, I don't know, those wouldn't necessarily address after-hour events, but there are two restrooms immediately south of the dining commons. I'm at the top, Dr. Rios, I think number 45 and 169, a little bit to the left. We have two single restrooms there.
So those would be faculty?
Those are adult restrooms, yes. And then at the bottom, there's another one right underneath the computer lab. So we have one adjacent to the computer lab. Right there. So we have one for the bottom half, and then we have several on the top half. And there is another set of small restrooms inside the gym for when the students are in there. They have a couple of fixtures that they can use without having to leave the gymnasium proper. They're not meant to be as large as the others. They're just meant to serve the one or two classes that are there when the gym is being used.
Okay. And then one other thing that I wanted to address is, I always look at the front of the schools and the appearance, and I always favor the modern look, and also want to see, some kind of canopy there for protection, for our students coming in.
Mm-hmm.
In regard to cover from the heat, from the sun, from the rain. So that would be that cover right there at the entrance. And do you know how wide that
is?
Yes,
there's a canopy that's about 10 feet wide. That's a canopy in the front of the school, primarily for good weather days, maybe a little bit of parent drop off or special needs drop off. But the two sides of the school, the idea once we situated on the site was to provide canopies on either side, so that we can have a drop-off loop on either side of the school. Those aren't shown here. We're working on siting the school on the property that's being considered, and the idea is to put a canopy on either side one that extends all the way down to the gymnasium, so that they can have drop off on that side, and then one on the left side, so we can drop off on that side also. Yes, sir. Dr.
I know Dr. Reyes has got his hand raised.
Mr. Mesa, when the project when the design team first shared with us a project, they had the gymnasium more towards the center. So we asked them to move it to the side so that we could have a parent drop off closest to the cafeteria. So the kids could come in and go to the cafeteria. Obviously there'd be a canopy area here. And then we asked them to move the gym over to the opposite side so that we could also have a drop-off pickup. That way the school would have two drop-off and pickups with a canopy on the outside on both of them to eliminate any type of traffic jam like we've seen in other schools. So this would cover it. And again, once it's more designed, it would have a canopy area here and up here by the cafeteria.
Okay, great.
I know Ms. Webb has a question, but before we leave, I guess I would just want to get some more direction. Even though it would increase the cost, is there an interest in just filling in this gap here with another classroom and adding that third bathroom closer to the top? If we could get some direction on that before we go, I'd appreciate it. I apologize, Ms. Webb. I know you had your hand up next.
I think I'm fine with the restrooms. I was concerned with the faculty, but I think we have enough as it is as well. Anyone else want to comment?
Yeah. Am I unmuted? From my perspective, I agree with Mr. Mesa on the restrooms. I'm not going to get a big hang up with that, especially considering those two smaller ones up front to offload any pressure there. And it's not that big a deal to walk down that little short hallway, providing those doors are open during those type of events. But I do have still a hang up on how much closed environment that administrative office would be. I'd still like to see that revisited. And then before we finish up here, I really want to understand how those parking lots and the playgrounds and connecting that to the cafeteria, however those transitions for kids in and out of the building for recess and parent drop-off, where that's at in this building, as a quick description. That'd probably be you, Mr. Rios, more than can too.
Yes, I can't see Mrs. Webb, but I think she had her hand up.
Yes, she's next.
Mrs. Webb?
I wanted to know where's the counselor's office, Dr. Rios? And does the counselor's office have a conference room where the counselor can conduct small group sessions versus one-on-one? That's one question. The other question was, how many science labs do we have? Is it one or two science labs or more?
There are two.
Two.
So Ms. Webb, the counselor's room, if you can see the screen, it's just right here adjacent to the principal's room. And there is a conference room here and here. So there's two conferences in the main area. Additionally, there's other rooms available to them, whether they be up here in the library resource area, all this area here, parts of the library, are places that are traditionally used because they have doors that close. But anyhow, the counselor's office is up here and it does have access to two immediate conference rooms. And then, I'm sorry, the science labs, they're over here at the bottom,
on the lower half,
fourth and fifth grade rooms.
Right there.
Here and here.
Okay. So the science labs would be for third, fourth, and fifth, or first, second, third, and then fourth and fifth, or what are we talking about?
The science labs are for the entire campus, but because of the way the state assesses, fifth grade students are the ones that traditionally use it more often, but they're for the entire campus.
And then my last question is, the gym, is that a full-size gym or a half-size gym?
The dimensions of the gym are the exact same size as Garfield, and it's a full-size gym. It has 2 courts on every side. Now, at the elementary level, because they're not used for competition, there's usually courts all the way around, so kids play in smaller units. But it does have a full court.
Okay. Anyone else with a question? I thought I heard Mr. Contreras.
Yes. My question, well, first, I agree with everybody as far as the front facade. I think, no disrespect or anything, but I think that facade is outdated. I think we were all looking for a more modern look.
Okay.
And then secondly, on the restrooms themselves, for the kids, for the students, are we exceeding or just meeting the bare minimum OSHA standards for the number of commodes and toiletries in those restrooms for the girls and the boys? Because I mean, we want to make sure we get it right. We have more than enough that we need for the students and that go to these restrooms.
Yes, sir. By code, one fixture is meant to address 50 people. We have 10 fixtures for the boys, 10 for the girls. So that would be 500 boys, 500 girls. That's 1,000 students, and the school's capacity is below that.
Great. Anyone else? I'll turn it over to administration for recommendation.
Yeah, I don't know that I ever got my questions answered though. So,
Mr. Smith?
Well, I think there was, I was going to ask for clarification on that. I know, Mr. Smith, that in terms of the layout of the school, the school is modeled after Garfield, just because Garfield is the last one that was built. But the school layout, as far as how far back it is from the main street in front of it, is modeled after Lonnie Green. So if we consider Lonnie Green, it's how deep it is into the property. And we look at the 2 loops for parent pickup and drop off and the playground, it's exactly after Lonnie Green. Now, obviously the property deal has to happen, but if you consider Lonnie Green, that's exactly what we're getting at, sir.
okay. And that's fine. So that helps me understand how kids get in and out functionally. So I'm good. I'm good with that. I still got to hang up with that front office area. And obviously the facade, and I think that will be good.
Mr. Mesa, if I may, I need to ask Mr. Cantu a question. Mr. Cantu, obviously we have to do some work on the facade of the school. I think
Sure.
all board members that spoke indicated they would prefer to see something modern.
Okay.
I think we've answered Mr. Smith's questions with the exception of the high school, the administration area. And I think Ms. Webb still has one more question. So in terms of that, would we bring back the schematic design for approval at another meeting, or do we make a recommendation pending those changes? This is obviously more changes that we could articulate in a recommendation.
Well, Dr. Rios, we did not anticipate getting the exterior look of the school taken care of at this board meeting. We felt that we needed some kind of consensus on the actual floor plan, because then that allows us to kind of develop the rest of it. We can definitely bring back that as an option and give you another option. So you have 2 options to discuss. We can have that one that's a little bit more traditional, and we can have one that's a little bit more modern. And then we can bring those back for your consideration, because we'd also like to bring back the site so it addresses Mr. Smith's kind of concerns with not having sufficient information right now to kind of know how it sits on the site, where the drop-offs are, and everything that entails. So we can definitely bring those items back. We'll take your recommendation on the development of the administration area and how we might address Mr. Smith's comments there, and we can revisit that as well if you wish.
Dr. Rios, I wanted to comment again. I know that the concerns that Mr. Smith has were valid, but before it used to be where the assistant principal was way across the campus and the principal had an office, again, very distant from the assistant principal, and even the counselor had their own office that was somewhat of quite an area away from administration. So it has evolved into administration, coming together with the assistant principal, the nurse, the counselor, and the conference rooms that are required for schools to be able to, again, effectively communicate, especially in areas of, sometimes there's emergencies that we have to give immediate instructions for administration to either go control traffic and so forth. And so that has evolved over time, but I think the way it looks on the plan, that's how most of the schools are configured now, because of what has happened in regard to safety and other areas of concern, where there are in the immediate area for, again, communication purposes and instructions in regard to emergencies. But I think as long as we have the input from the administrators that, again, are working at the various campuses and various layouts to point out some of the weaknesses that they have on theirs, on their campus, and to address it for this new campus, I think we'll be a lot better off. Because I remember, for example, San Felipe Middle School, where again there were different buildings, and some of them were inside the main building, some were outside. It created quite a distance to be able to effectively communicate with administrators.
Yeah, I think if I got
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, so I think you're hitting the nail on the head, Mr. Mesa. I mean, if you envision what Dr. Rios has right now, he walks out of his office and we can touch 5 people right outside his office. And that would be what I would envision that the principal would be able to do. Not walk down a hallway and then he sees one person that he can contact, and then he's got to go somewhere else to get that whole corridor is just boxed in. It's very siloed. The way I see the layout, I think everybody in the immediate area is definitely the right way to do it, but accessible. That's not accessible the way that's laid out, in my opinion. And that's why I mean, not that I want people spread across the building.
Point well taken. Dr. Rios?
So I'm sorry, before I go to my next point, did Ms. Webb have a comment or a question?
Ms. Webb?
I just have a comment. You mentioned that the new school was being looked at based on Lonnie Green, but we also have to look at the fact that Lonnie Green was modeled after Calderon. So in a way, I'm glad that we're looking at all the campuses, because Garfield was the last one that was built, and Lonnie Green was prior to Garfield. So when looking at all the campuses and visiting with the principals, I think that's a good idea. But my concern is still the counselor's accessibility to a conference when she needs to meet with a student right away and she doesn't have her own space to visit with that student or the group of students versus just one.
Anyone else? Dr. Rios?
Yeah, so Octavio, if the board approves the schematic design with the understanding that we revisit the administration area, because that comes to the questions that Mr. Smith is asking and both Ms. Webb. I just don't want to approve the schematic design and then have y'all go do construction drawings based on this schematic design for the administration building. I think the rest of the building, I think in principle, they all agree. We obviously still have to decide the drop-off and pickups, but we need to know the land and have that deal finalized. So if the board approves the schematic design with the understanding that the administrative wing is going to be revisited, y'all are okay to proceed, but hold off on that particular part of the building and bring it back at one of our upcoming meetings?
Yes, sir. What we would do is we would basically freeze the development of the structural component of the building and the architectural component there. And we would then go through further refinement or development of these other options that are being discussed and comments that are being received. And then we can incorporate those. In addition to, we'll look at the front elevation to give you all something a little bit more modern. And your definition of modern, Mr. Smith, is that a lot of glazing? Is that more windows? Is it just not some of the detail that we have there that's kind of traditional?
Yeah, I think there's not as much of that traditional front look. You know,
Okay.
I'm not saying more glazing or anything like that, but I mean, it just looks like something that's been there for 50 years, whatever, from a generic look.
Okay. Then we'll look at that, and we'll provide you another option for the exterior elevation. So that would not be part of this schematic design approval. But if you all are okay kind of with the heart of the school, the back of the gym, we can continue with structural development and detailing there. The classrooms are a great big portion of the school, detailing those, the ceilings and the HVAC and everything else. Then we'll continue in that direction and bring back the administration area, the front elevation and the site.
Mr. Cantu,
Yes, sir.
Mr. Overfeld had a question.
And thank you. I think it was more for administration and maybe Mr. Gentry as well. But I think y'all answered it, but I want to be sure. When we go forward with what's been talked about tonight, less the front and the admin area, it's not going to begin to push back construction or start dates by any big stretch of the imagination, is it? Or if we just completely tabled it tonight and brought it back in May when everything wasn't done, instead of doing it piecemeal, does that start to domino everything out from here as far as a start date? We've been able to react fairly quickly in the refinement and the incorporation of some of the comments so far. I think if we were to completely kind of say, well, we're going to wait till May, then that may start to impact the schedule. But if we can be freed up to work on certain things that are okay, then we can kind of concentrate on those while we work on some of the other items. And I think we can continue the process moving forward on the current schedule.
And Mr. Cantu, if I could also address one area which, I know lately the architects are getting away from windows in regard to seeing student movement for safety reasons. Yeah, it used to be where schools were designing, schools were being designed with large windows and lots of view of the students and faculty inside, but that's being discouraged quite a bit with everything that has happened in regard to school violence. So I'm not in favor of any large windows that, again, would see student movement. Some of these buildings that were built, the view is being blocked now because of for safety concerns. And Dr. Rios, wanted to add a comment?
Well, I wanted to address what Mr. Overfeld had asked, and specifically, yes, Mr. Overfeld, every time we delay by 30 days, it delays them from beginning their construction documents. So at a minimum, approving at least the back end of the school would free them up to move forward and not be a complete delay. But to not approve anything tonight, it does set us back 30 days. And that's fine if that's what we need to do. But I just want to be clear that one setback after the other then does begin to encroach upon the opening day.
Mr. Smith?
Just one final comment. I mean, overall, Mr. Cantu, I really like the 30,000 foot view of the school. I think the way the halls are done and that whole back end, I have no issue with that. If that helps us get started, I'm good to go.
Okay, thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Mesa, I can read a recommendation.
Anyone else have a question? I think all questions have been answered. We'll move with the recommendation.
Mr. Mesa, members of the board, it is a recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve the schematic design for the new elementary school as presented, with the exception of the exterior elevations and the design of the administrative wing.
You heard the recommendation. Is there a motion for approval? Motion from Mr. Contreras, seconded by Ms. Gonzalez. All those in favor, Mr. Contreras? Favor, Ms. Gonzalez? In favor, Mrs. Webb? In favor, Mr. Smith? In favor, Amy Haynes? In favor, Mr. Orfeld? In favor, and myself, in favor. Passed unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Cantu.
Thank you. Thanks for all your comments and input.
Thank you. At this time, we're going to go back to administration. Item 10A. Consider and take possible action on a resolution to determine 2020 spring semester grading policy GPAs for the spring 2020 semester for the 2019-2020 through 2023-2024 class cohorts and class ranking for the class of 2020. Dr. Rios?
Thank you, Mr. Mesa, members of the board. The superintendents have a checklist that's provided by the commissioner for this particular time, this pandemic. And the checklist has just a whole lot of items that we have to address. One of them includes the grades for the second semester and how we're going to calculate grade point averages. All this has everything to do with only the classes that go on a high school graduation transcript. So with that in mind, we started looking at all of the pros and cons. We considered grading through the end of the school year and having the grades count on the GPA. We considered having grades calculated through the fourth 6 weeks and having those grades count on the GPA. And then we considered just having grades for the first semester count on the GPA. There's a couple of reasons why we're making a specific recommendation, and please know that we had a whole lot of discussions, particularly with the high school principals. The difficulty with going through the fourth 6 weeks, because the fourth 6 weeks we were still in school, is dual credit classes. As Mr. Overfeld stated in an earlier agenda item, colleges do not give classes by the 6 weeks. So anybody taking a dual credit course would not have a grade for fourth 6 weeks. So counting the GPA through the 4 6 weeks immediately is problematic and almost impossible because not everybody would have a grade. So then the other option was counting grades all the way through the school year. And here's the difficulty with that process. There are a lot of classes being taken right now where students are having to work extremely difficult to earn their B or their C, and in some cases an A in dual credit classes that are weighted and that will count towards your GPA. But there's also another number of classes that, because of the distance learning, it's difficult to replicate the rigor. So because this has implications not only for our senior class, but also for our junior class and our sophomores, and even some of the freshmen that are taking dual credit classes, it would begin to pose a bigger problem because you're going to have some students that are going to earn grades in weighted and also in weighted classes that may not be a very competitive grade, and then you're going to have a whole lot of students that are going to earn a higher grade than they otherwise would have and be competitive with it. So we don't have a level playing field right now for the class depending on what you're taking. And that's going to create a whole lot of problems for future GPAs. It's going to affect more people in a negative way than it would affect some in a positive way. So therefore, we have a difficult time recommending that this semester's grades count towards GPA weights, not only for this senior class, but for all the classes that will follow. We did a small study, and we looked at grades, everything being equal. Would grades this year affect the ranking in the top 10% if we counted it towards the GPA? And we didn't see any major shift in the top 10% overall, which means that it would stay the same. Now, if we introduce a variation in grades, depending on how grades come out, then I can't tell you what it would look like because we don't know. But I know that it would negatively affect a whole lot more students than it would help. So therefore, the safest recommendation is to fail students that don't turn in work, pass those that do turn in work, assign a numerical grade to their transcript that then the NCAA or somebody else can use, but for our purposes, not counted towards the GPA and class ranking for this semester, our senior class, and in the future. Question, sir?
I just want to say that's a very difficult decision to make. Everyone is going to be struggling through this, and I know that we're never going to get 100% satisfaction. There's always going to be different scenarios and different students affected, different ways. But I understand exactly what you're saying, and to me, my opinion would be that would be the best option to do. To go with, again, exactly what you mentioned in regard to the grading and the cohorts, the groups that are to follow. It's been a very situation that has never been encountered before, and so these are uncharted waters, and we have to do the best that we can here. But I certainly would like to hear from other board members. But in my opinion, I agree with you in regard to going with that scenario. Questions? Mr. Othel?
So, Dr. Rios, you're leaning to, because I want to understand it so I can base my question right, you're leaning to raising all GPAs at what they were at the end of the semester?
Correct.
Okay, so as an example, I've got, as assistant professor of history and government at Southwest Texas Junior College, I have 3 ECHS classes. They're federal government and Texas government, which are required courses that the seniors have to go in and pass in order to graduate. So the 90 students that I have right now, everything that they're doing in my class would essentially be for not, or because based on the guidance that I've got from the junior college that they sent out, that the dual credit, they'll receive a final course letter grade that will be recorded at the registrar's office at SWTJC, and then the instructors submit a final course grade to the appropriate school district officials in either numerical or letter grade format as requested by the district. So if my fear is full shutdown with the last 3.5 weeks left in our semester at the college. And if I see full shutdown, there would be seniors that would receive failing grades there. And if they receive a failing grade, they don't get their diploma. There, so it puts dual credit, particularly those who are in the spring semester, in a very unique position, and there for how it's going to wind up, and for those ECHS kids taking, as in my class or any of the other classes that are over there. Other thing is, we had UIL seasons that were getting ready to ramp up, and then of course came to a close. And there were those students who were busting rear to ensure that their grades were up and being competitive there for GPA, because we know there are some outliers at 21, 22, that these last 6 weeks or 3 weeks, 6 weeks could cause a change in the top 20 or the top 8 over at the ECHS, because we've seen it before where in the last week when the GPA is calculated, there have been people that have jumped several spots. So I'm worried about that. I'm worried about my students and what their perception is going to be and what I'm going to be told to give on the college side, and what I'm going to be told to give numerically to the district. I'm kind of in a unique position because I'm seeing it from both sides right now, and what's going to happen. So those are my first two, and then I'll come back later to some other stuff.
Yes, sir. Well, it's difficult from what angle we're looking at it at all ends. But I would say that in the case of the junior college, they have a little bit more of power, because that goes on their transcript. That's going to be seen by other colleges as they transfer those grades. Whereas a high school transcript, they're looking at the GPA. I don't see students not continuing to perform when they know that the junior college is going to count the numerical grade, and it is going to go on their permanent transcript for the rest of their life. Employers don't usually look at high school transcripts, they do look at colleges. So I don't see students shutting down. I will tell you that different universities are doing different things. I talked today to people that work in upper administration in the UT system, and it just depends on what college you talk to, who's doing pass-fail and who's doing otherwise. But I don't see students shutting down because it's going to be pass-fail. I do see students that have worked hard and want to compete. And the only reason for counting this as a GPA is to benefit the students that want to compete in their grade point average. Students want to graduate, and they're not going to shut down. They're not going to not graduate because it's pass-fail. This counting this semester benefits students who are competing to be in the top 10% or who are being the top 10, top 20 graduates. That's who it primarily benefits. And I'm all for that. I'm not the enemy of that. But when we look at the whole landscape, there's a whole lot more students. As a matter of fact, there's 80% more students that it would negatively affect. But again, I'm bringing this difficult situation for discussion because it is one of the things that we have to do. And I'm making a recommendation that helps the majority of the students. But at the end of the day, it's only a recommendation, and it's the board that has to make the decision. And I'm very respectful of that position.
Dr. Rios, could you make sure that these questions that are being asked will be forwarded to someone that is dealing with pretty much the same situation in regard to college courses that students, do language credit, so that we can get the cross section of what other districts are doing. But I just, want to make sure that those questions that are being asked tonight, we can find an answer for. So as your discussions with other superintendents and once you hear from the commissioner that these areas can be addressed.
Yes, Mr. Mesa, we have weekly discussions with a group of superintendents, and the commissioner has talked about this. And again, it comes back to it's being a local decision. Everything that that the board is asking now has been asked, and it comes back to the board policy that indicates that it is a local decision, and they'll be respectful of it. To tell you that some districts are doing more of option A or option B would not be accurate, sir. It's just depending on the 7 board members that are making the decision and the superintendent that's making the recommendation. In this case, I am making the recommendation, but I fully understand the difficult situation, and I'm very respectful of whatever the board decides.
Questions from other board members? Mr. Contreras.
Yes, sir. Board and Dr. Rios, I'm along the same lines as Mr. Overfeld. I mean, I really have concerns over these ECHS kids and dual credit kids. I mean, it's a tough situation all across for all the seniors and everything. For everyone, all the students. In fact, this year is going to go down as one of them with a little asterisk, right? Because we basically ended it, it's kind of like a cliffhanger. But my biggest concern is with those ESS kids and the dual credit, and what's going to be, and for the seniors, of course, but what's the best thing for them? How can we help them the most? I mean, sending them off into college days.
Again, we did a small study of the senior class. It wouldn't affect either cohort at ECHS or Del Rio High School significantly. I think in one model that we looked at, I think kids, 2 students in the top 10% switched from 7 to 8 to 8 to 7. It didn't affect anybody at early college, high school, if we were to freeze it for this year. But of course, this has implications for years to come. The other part that I wanted to mention, it's hard to assess grades when, for example, we don't have the technology to administer semester exams. So semester exams, in all likelihood, will happen very sporadically. The campuses may have a project for a semester exam. Projects may average the 4th, 5th, and 6 weeks grades for a semester exam. It's just going to be very difficult to say this is the actual grade that students would have otherwise earned, including all those Fs that I talked about earlier. But it doesn't, at least for this senior class, it doesn't affect the ranking.
Mr. Smith?
So, when does the board have to make a decision?
I think that the board doesn't have to make a decision right now. I'm going to make a request. I mentioned it through the board update. I'm requesting to have the first budget workshop in early May. I believe it's May 7th, May 4th or May 7th. We could make a decision at that point. It doesn't have to be today, but I would not venture to go much further than that day in May.
Anyone else? Ms. Webb?
And my question was similar to Mr. Mesa's. I want to know how many more districts were following more or less the same process that we're doing. And then the other question was prior to the incomplete, because I believe teachers were told that an incomplete would not count. Now we're saying that the incompletes are going to be zeros, but the fifth 6 weeks is already closed. Will that window be open for the teachers to change grades if students have submitted late assignments? Or not?
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Like I said, we are going to allow students to make up assignments through the end of the summer. Now, we still have to determine what kind of passing grade you would get at that point. Is it going to be in a credit recovery type sense where you make a 70? Or is it going to be where you're able to earn the grade that you're able to earn? We haven't made those decisions yet, but it has never been questionable, or it has never been undetermined that students can make up the work and that I can change to an actual grade. They will have the opportunity.
Okay. But my question is, will they have an opportunity? Will teachers have an opportunity if students submitted their assignments between now and the end of May to come in and change the grades, let's say for the 5th 6 weeks, because that's already closed. So teachers can't input grades right now unless that session is, or that section is open.
No, there's a process for teachers to change grades. Absolutely. There is. They can do it any time between now and the end of the school year. Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, we encourage it.
Dr. Rios, I wanted to address several items. One being that students probably do not know that they're going to get a failing grade and be required to go to summer school if they do not turn in their assignments. We need to publicize that so that students get on the ball, turn in whatever work they have missed, and turn it in for a grade. I would not want to have 400 kids going to summer school, you know, if they can do the work and make up the work that they failed to turn in. Allow the parents and everyone else, family members, to assist their siblings to make sure that the work is turned in. So one, being that notice. Two, is the fact that, these are uncharted waters. We're going into something that has never happened before. It's a very difficult decision to make, but at this point, I feel that the recommendation that you're making is the best that we have to work with. I would want to go ahead and approve this tonight as a resolution. I don't think, any new thing is going to come out of this. I think most districts are going to have to make a decision very soon, and we're at that point. But someone else had a question? Mr. Smith?
So, I don't know if it's a question or a comment. I mean, if we're impacting any kid 1 or 80%, it's wrong, right? I mean, what they earn is what they earn, right? And if we don't have the answer to that today, we need to find that answer. And I know Dr. Rios and his staff have been working the subject, but it's obvious our decision today, if we vote one way or the other, is going to have an impact. Aren't there other options that don't positively or negatively impact our student rating? If there's not, then there's not. But I don't know that we should end the discussion today. If we still got another 2 weeks to go investigate it, let's go investigate it for another 2 weeks, and then make a decision. But right now, we're going to say whichever way we go, we're going to impact our kids, consciously impact. And I'm not saying there's any options because I don't know. I'm not an educator, but it just doesn't feel right at the moment.
Dr. Rios, if we were to postpone this decision, you said May 7th is your budget meeting?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Let me just check real quick. I have a calendar here in front of me. Let me just make sure that I got the right day for the budget meeting. Let me look real quick here. Yes, sir.
May 7th.
May 7th is when we're asking the board to come back for the first budget workshop, and then we have a couple of other items that we'd like to take care of in a special call meeting, and this could be one of them.
Is there input from other board members? How you feel about this? Cesaro?
But again, going back to ranking and GPA, I know because I've seen it where at the end of 1 year, a couple of years ago, there was someone who jumped several spots in the top 20, jumped way up because of stuff that was calculated right at the last minute. And so I do believe it can make these two, at least 4 and 5, fourth and fifth, 6 weeks can make a difference in GPA itself. And again, I think the dual credit ones, they're left in this kind of limbo area because I'm not going to report my students' grades until somewhere around the 15th of May. And if I have a senior that unfortunately doesn't pass my class, you know, they get the high school credit and they get the college credit as well for federal government because it's required at the high school, it's required on the college side. That would only give them less than 13 days to try and do credit recovery, because I'm getting the impression that since it wouldn't necessarily count for GPA, would it still meet the requirement for them to graduate from high school and there with a high school diploma? If they unfortunately got the F on the college side, but would they be able to do credit recovery in time to do to be able to get their diploma, which is something we still have to go in and talk about. And then if for some reason we were to decide to push this 2 more weeks to talk about it again, I'd like an email established for parents to at least submit their concerns or their input on it, because ultimately we're affecting their students' lives, and there are those that have a vested interest in what their children are doing. They've been helping them throughout their high school career, so they kind of have a vested interest in it as well. So just my thoughts.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Mr. Contreras?
Yes, sir. Dr. Rios and Mr. Mesa. I mean, I don't see, we're going to affect so many kids. I don't see the rush. I think if we have another opportunity for May 7th, let's go ahead and take that opportunity and do have and take some senior parents' input. I mean, I think it's important. I think we owe it to them that we just wait till the next opportunity and do it then, and maybe something, we can come up with something from now till then. Why rush?
Thank you, Mr. Contreras. Anyone else? Dr. Rios?
Just to clarify a couple of things. I want to make it abundantly clear. The seniors right now are the ones that are the least affected because one, the models that we looked at, it doesn't affect the class rank of the top 20 students in both early college high school and Del Rio High School. who it does affect a lot more is our current juniors, sophomores, and freshmen. And of course, as a superintendent and board, we have to look at graduation rates. So if we look at the number of kids right now that are failing, and we look at how much work they're going to have to complete to come to passing, and how long those failing grades are going to be there. If we go to a grading system, then it's harder to have the averages eventually work out to passing. Because if you're on a pass-fail, then we can take that course and say, okay, well, you make a 70, it's a pass, which is a state standard. But if we go based on a numerical grade, then it takes longer, because then we cannot average whatever success they may have had in the 4th 6 weeks. So if we had students that had success in the 4th 6 weeks and can average the 5th and 6th 6 weeks, then it's easier for them to make up those classes. And we just have a whole lot of students right now. Anyway, my only point is we keep talking about seniors, but it is the group that is the least affected with having to pass-fail, because the rank isn't going to switch too much. Furthermore, kids that apply to college use the transcript for the end of the first semester of their senior year, and most of them use the transcript for the end of their junior year. So it has a whole lot less effect on seniors than it has on everybody else. Anyway, I just wanted to share that as a point of explanation. I don't have a problem, Mr. Mesa, waiting to have the board decide until May 7th. I don't have a problem in soliciting input from other parents. I could visit with both the principals at Early College High School and Delray High School to see how they can obtain that input and how we can organize it to provide that opportunity.
Okay. I really would like to allow more time again to hear from everyone interested and involved with our decision here. So I think, we could wait till May 7th if that's the preference of the board. Mr. Smith?
One final question. Is it feasible, and you don't have to answer the question now, but put some thought into it. Is it feasible to have more of a hybrid approach where you approach the seniors as a different methodology than what you do the juniors and below? You don't have to answer the question now. Anyway, I would either make a motion or second the motion, whichever, to postpone this to May the 7th.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. And Mr. Contreras had a question.
No question. Like I said, I'm just May 7th. I think would be appropriate, and just give everybody an opportunity for us to listen more to the parents. I'm pretty sure there's parents out there looking at it and watching it. So just give them an opportunity to have some input, and why rush the vote? Personally, I'm against the pass-fail system. Just off the bat.
Okay, well, Mr. Smith has made a motion that we postpone this until May 7th. Is there a second to the motion? Amy Haynes. All those in favor, Mr. Contreras? In favor? Yana Gonzalez? In favor? Linda Webb? In favor? Mr. Smith? In favor? Amy Haynes? In favor? Josh Overflow? In favor? And myself. Okay, this matter has been postponed until May 7th. We go on to item 10B. It's a discussion item, discussion regarding alternative plans for a graduation ceremony for the class of 2020. Dr. Rios.
Yes, Mr. Mesa, this isn't an action item, but it's a discussion item. It's important that we discuss it now because next week we begin the month of May already, and graduation is traditionally at the end of May. And we have to, again, have a discussion so that we can also make a decision no later than that May 7th meeting regarding what we're going to do with graduation. We have a video that kind of depicts just how difficult it's been for the community, both parents and students, having to deal with having schools closed and having to suspend so many activities for seniors. If we can watch that video first, and then I'd like to present the options. With your permission, Mr. Mesa, I'll ask Mr. Reno Luna to cue up the video.
Sure.
Go ahead, Reno.
Aristotle once said, "It's during our darkest moments we must focus to see the light." On these fields and courts, in front of the hometown fans and families, our athletes give 110% of themselves. In these shops, our students prepare for competitions and earn industry certifications. In these hallways and classrooms, our students earn an education to take them on the next step of life. On this stage and in classrooms after school and on weekends, our students prepare for theatrical and academic competitions. On March 13th, 2020, UIL seasons came to a halt, some before they could even begin, as districts around the state, like ours, closed their doors to help flatten the curve. Stadiums, fields, courts, classrooms, all silent now before the breeze across the bleachers and the fields. But if you listen closely, you can hear the echoes of what once was and will be again. San Felipe del Rio Consolidated Independent School District turns the lights on to honor all of our students. Whether it be in athletics, academics, CTE, we miss you. Hope to see you again soon. To the senior class of 2020, this is dedicated to you. On April 24th, 2020, stadium lights and field lights will be turned on for 1 hour at sunset. San Felipe del Rio. Together, we are better.
Thank you to Mr. Overfeld. He brought this idea to us, and Mr. Reno Luna, Sandra Navis, Willard, and Peter collaborated and just put together a nice video. We look forward to turning the stadium lights on this Friday at sunset. So having said that, we have some decisions to make about graduation. I'm going to share some ideas with y'all that we can consider for graduation. I'll just share with you all that obviously all these ideas are contingent on the fact that we're still required to maintain social distancing, and two, that we're allowed by the authorities in our community to have these gatherings, because they would exceed the number of people allowed in one place. So I'll share the ideas with y'all, and then we can have some discussion. We don't have to make a decision today. As a matter of fact, it's not an item for decision, it's just for discussion. I'll also mention that the video that you just saw will be released here shortly, so that I know that because of the platform we're using for the meeting, the video is a little bit distorted. But once you see it on YouTube or on Facebook, it'll just be very continuous and very nice. So again, thank you, Mr. Overfeld. Sandra, if you can bring up the presentation.
Just want to say thank you, Mr. Overfeld. Great job.
think I would have preferred Morgan Freeman, but you did pretty good.
Do you want me to call up the presentation center, or are y'all doing it?
Yes, is it on your screen already?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we're ready to go.
Okay, am I the host? Can I share? Okay, let me go to the slideshow.
I believe I have it on my screen already, and it's been shared.
Okay, so are you sharing it or am I sharing it? Because I see it on my screen.
Is everyone seeing it?
It worked because I was sharing. Let me just be the one to share it, Sandra, okay?
Okay, yes.
Okay. Okay. These are class of 2020 considerations for graduation. One of the first options that we considered was to hold graduation at the SPC Center over a course of 2 days. Essentially, we would have 3 graduations per day on a Friday and a Saturday. We'd have 100 students per session. Students would be assigned seats to keep in line with social distancing guidelines. Of course, having up to 6 graduations would require for the guest speakers to attend all the graduation sessions. We're talking about our class president, valedictorian, salutatorian, the different students that make speeches during graduation. Then in this scenario, parents would not be allowed in the building, but they could be seeing their students walk the stage live on channel 1301 or on Facebook. Having 3 graduations a day, because it's indoors in the SPC, it would allow us to just keep a well air-conditioned setting regardless of the time. And 100 students could very quickly transition through graduation. So option A is to have it at the SPC in the manner described. Option B would be to hold graduation ceremony in the parking lot, whether it be at the stadium or whether we ask the city for the Civic Center. Again, we're talking about 100 students per session, but this would take multiple sessions over a week's time because they would more than likely have to be done early in the morning or late at night, because in May we expect that there would already be some sort of heat. Now, the difference between having it at the SPC and having it in cars is that in this case, although probably a whole lot more uncomfortable, students would be in the company of their parents, and then they would just drive on in front of the stage wherever we set it, and somebody would hand them their diploma, and then they would drive off. It does present a challenge for live broadcast, though. And option C would be to hold a virtual graduation. We would start now collecting video footage of our speakers, including board members and valedictorian, salutatorian, everybody that would participate. And the graduates and their parents would watch a broadcast from their living room area. The students' name and pictures would be called and displayed one at a time to recognize a graduate, and we could even add captions that would describe the student and perhaps where they're going to school or military or workforce if they wanted to. Option D would be to postpone graduation until these stay-at-home restrictions have been lifted. Now, unfortunately, we don't know when these restrictions will be lifted, and the longer we postpone it, the less likely it is that we would have a graduation ceremony. And I apologize, this option here, option B, holding in the parking lot, That's inclusive of having it in the stadium. Obviously, again, it has to be over numerous days. So we should have listed that as a separate option. So in short, the options are at the SPC with students present, actually walking the stage and their families viewing it live on TV. Option B would be to have it at, I better review these. Option B would to have it in a parking lot such as the football stadium or the Civic Center. Option C is to have a virtual graduation. Option D is really to have it at the football stadium. Again, 100 students at a time, only 2 parents in the stadium. But again, having it over multiple days because we could probably only hold 100 students 6 feet apart and be able to create the social distancing. And then option E is to again, postpone. For this particular decision, we would like to task the high school administration with getting input from the students as to which option they would want, and then try to get a different input from the parents to see if they mirror each other, and obviously consider other options that y'all may have for us to discuss. Mr. Mesa?
Thank you, Dr. Rios, for the presentation, and thank you, Sandra, for putting everything together. Mr. Contreras has a question first.
Well, I mean, I think they're all great choices. However, I think this is a matter for the seniors, and only the seniors should vote. I mean, that's just my opinion. I went through my graduation class of '91. I know how it feels. I'm pretty sure everybody knows how it feels, and I think we should leave it up to today's seniors for them to vote. Set a voting day and say, hey, show up to vote. I mean, that's the reality. They're going to be voting in November. Most of them are going to turn to 18. Get in the first experience to vote. Have the seniors vote.
Thank you, sir. I won't tell you my graduation date, but I just want to thank administration. I think we're doing a great job. I really, think that's a great thing that Mr. Contreras suggested to involve the students because it is their day. I kind of favor A, but it's their day, and seniors need to be involved with that decision making. But I think it's wonderful. The idea is great. I would not like to be outside the heat. I'm all in favor of option A. Anyone else? Amy?
Sharing my screen, am I?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mesa. I would like the seniors to have some input on this, and maybe a parent as well. Option A looks good. I also like the virtual as well, the virtual graduation as well. So, but let's just hear what the seniors have to say along with their parents. That would work for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Mr. Smith?
Well, thank you, Dr. Rios and your team putting that together. I think that's helpful. As you know, it's something that I've been concerned about for quite a while. Mr. Contreras, great job. I think that's the way to go, is get the kids to make the decision. Having some input from the parents is cool, but the seniors make the decision of how they would like to proceed. I like it.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Ms. Webb?
I agree that the students should make a decision. You have your senior class president, so I think that the seniors should vote on all of these options and see what they have to say. It's their graduation. It's not a parent's graduation. It's the senior's graduation. So let's see what they have to say.
Thank you. Ms. Gonzalez?
I agree. I like the A first, but the students should vote, I believe.
Great. And again, I thank administration for doing such a great job. I think all four are viable options. And as long as we have something and involve the students in the decision making, would be great. Mr. Orfeld?
I like the variety of options that were presented on, I know on Thursday, I attended the webinar that TASB did on graduations and what some schools were doing. Some schools were doing, like Anna ISD was doing a drive-through graduation, but they've only got 250 graduates. And then Klein ISD, which has 4 high schools, they've got the NRG Stadium rented out, and they've got a bunch of different options to where it's either just, you know, only the students show up, and then later in the summer they do one with the parents or something like that. So I'm glad we have the different options, and yeah, kind of echo what everyone else says. I think the seniors should have some input on it. They're in a unique setting. They were the generation that was born during the time of 9/11, and now we're having to graduate during the time of COVID-19 there. So maybe we can get some input from them. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Rios? Ms. Webb?
Would we be able to get, if the seniors vote, get results before our next meeting on the 7th?
Yes, ma'am. We just have to huddle up tomorrow and come up with the best way to have as many students vote as possible. I would probably want to do a Zoom meeting with some of the leadership of the senior class first, just to see if they have any other ideas that we can include in the ballot. These were just a culmination of ideas that I gathered in talking to other superintendents in that weekly discussion that I have with them, and hearing input from different community members. I've had a handful of students reach out. I have a senior also, but there might be other ideas. So in the next couple of days, we'll set up a Zoom meeting and review these options with them, and then put a ballot together and figure out how's the best way to get the most feedback from the most students.
Thank you.
And so, yes, our goal is to get back to you by May 7th.
Great. This is a discussion item, and I'm glad that we had input from everyone. And again, great options. Just want to thank administration. With that being said, we go on to item 10C, call for 2020-2022 CASB Advocacy Agenda Resolutions. Sandra Hernandez.
Okay, bear with me. I am having some technical difficulties. We're waiting for, there might be a small delay, a lag, while it comes up on the screen.
Sandra, I think you're still sharing the previous presentation.
Can we go to another item and then come back to this?
Sure, absolutely, Mr. Mesa. We can move on to 11A, and then we can come back.
Okay. We're going on to curriculum and instruction. Item 11A, consideration to approve submittal of the Headstart continuance funding grant application in the amount of $2,359,207 with non-facility, non-funding sources. I can't remember it. In the amount of $589,802 for a total amount of $2,949,009 to Region 6 Headstart office, along with the annual report for public self-assessment, community assessment, training and technical assistance plan, cost allocation plan, selection criteria, program goals, and school readiness plan. Amy Childress and Dr. Alana Talamantes.
Lana?
I'm here, sir. We're trying to get it. There we go.
NFS stands for non-federal share. This is
There we go. Next slide, show the picture.
From the beginning.
And then we're going to share the screen.
So, where are you in the share?
while they're doing that, the non-federal share is an in-house contribution, transportation, buildings,
Click on this.
electricity, everything else that's included that is not part of the program cost, but it's in-house contribution from our district.
Screen two. Is that the right one? I guess. Yeah. Double.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and start. Good evening, Mr. Mesa, Dr. Rios, and members of the board. My name is Alana Talamantes, and I am the interim director for Irene C. Cardwell Headstart and Pre-Kindergarten, where the foundation of academic learning begins. The grant information that I review tonight has been presented and approved by the Irene C. Cardwell Policy Council on April 1st. All pertinent Head Start documentation has been provided to you in your packet. This evening, I will present to you the summary of the Head Start continuation grant, the supplemental grant, and ending with our interagency agreements that we annually apply for each year. In our Head Start grant, the Head Start program operations in the amount of $2,326,811 will be federally funding 346 students for Head Start. Head Start training and technical assistance in the amount of $32,396. Total funding in the amount of $2,359,207 to federally fund 346 students. The slide.
Alana, are you there?
Yes, sir. I'm trying to get the slides on. Can you see the slide under the Head Start grant?
Cost of living application.
Oh, that's a different one.
I'm sorry, Sandra, I have an idea. Let's stop sharing the screen and come back.
Yes, I believe we're having, the computer is freezing up on us, and that's why we're having some delays.
Okay, just stop sharing the screen. Remove that so we can go on with the meeting. I have an option. I have a solution for this.
You probably close it and open it up again, because I think if you have too many things open, it'll freeze it up on the Zoom.
Okay, Mr. Mesa, we have two options. You tell me which way you want to go. We can move on to a couple of the options that don't require presentations, and then I can have Sandra and Alana very quickly do copies of the pertinent slides, and we could deliver them to each one of you as we come back to it. Or we can just have them make the presentation just verbally with no video. Whichever way you prefer, Mr. Mesa.
I really prefer, being that it's a continuance year after year, I would prefer to do it without video and just present the application for submitting.
Okay, perfect. Then, Alana, just talk us through each one of the agenda items A, B, and C, and
Yes.
We can move forward.
Okay, sir. So I was at the Headstart grant, and now I'm at the non-federal share for the Headstart grant in the amount of $589,000 with and to move on to the supplemental grant, which is the cost of living adjustment in the amount of $46,536. The quality improvement in the amount of $92,036. Total funding in the amount of $138,572. Non-federal share in the amount of $35,419. Our list of the interagency agreements and other community agencies include health providers, schools, daycare centers, and community agencies. In conclusion to these grants, I would like to thank Pam Padilla, Patty Dixon, and all the faculty at Cardwell Headstart for their dedication and support to our young learners. That's the presentation and the summary of the grants for Headstart continuation, the supplemental grant, and our interagency agreements. Are there any questions?
Questions? I'll start with a question, Alana. I know that
Yes, sir.
on the visiting cycle this year, it was a phone interview, correct?
I'm sorry, what's that, sir?
Regarding the from the region 6 regional office in Dallas.
Yes.
As far as the evaluation cycle, you had the phone interview this year. You did not have an on-site.
Yes, sir. We had the focus area 1 audit. It was all through telephone conference. Our audit, as far as them coming down, Dallas, they will be coming down 2020-2021 school year.
So any major findings in regard to the audit that we need to know about?
No, sir, they haven't even sent us the results yet from the ones that we had in January. We were supposed to get them in early March, but because of the COVID, they said the results would be delayed.
Okay. Okay, I'll turn it over to anyone else with questions. Ms. Webb?
I don't have a question. I just want to applaud the program and the policy council members, especially when they work with the grant and the school readiness program, because like Alana stated, it is a foundation for all the learning, and the whole grant is over, what, 2 million, right, Alana?
Yes, ma'am.
So I just want to applaud the staff at the policy council, because our parents are the key for that program. So just thank the staff and thank the parents. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
At this time, Lana, we do have each one broken down into one, the main Headstart application, and then we have the cost of living.
Yes.
And then we have the memorandum of understanding with the Headstart agency. So without any other delay, Dr. Rios, I think you had.
I'll read the recommendations, Mr. Mesa.
Recommendation?
Are you ready for that, sir?
Yes, we're going to do one at a time.
Yes, sir. Item 11A, it is a recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve the submittal of the attached application for a Headstart continuous funding grant for the 2020-21 fiscal year, along the annual report to public, self-assessment, community assessment, training, and technical assistance plan, cost allocation plan, selection criteria, program goals, and school readiness plan to be submitted to the appropriate Headstart headquarters as presented and authorized by Mr. Raymond Mesa, SFDR CISD Board President, to sign.
You've heard the recommendation from administration. I will entertain a motion for approval. Mr. Contreras, seconded by Mrs. Webb. All those in favor, Mr. Contreras? In favor? Myself in favor. Diana Gonzalez? In favor, Mrs. Webb? In favor, Mr. Smith? In favor, Amy Haynes? In favor, Mr. Overfeld? Motion passes unanimously. We go to item 11B.
Yes, Mr. Mesa. It is a recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve the submittal of the attached application for Headstart COLA Quality Improvement Grant for the 2020-21 fiscal year to be submitted to the appropriate Headstart headquarters as presented and authorized by Mr. Raymond Mesa, SFDR CISD Board President, to sign.
You've heard the recommendation from administration. I will entertain a motion for approval. Mrs. Webb, seconded by Ms. Gonzalez. Mr. Contreras, your vote? In favor? Myself in favor. Diana Gonzalez? In favor. Mrs. Webb? In favor. Mr. Smith? In favor. Amy Haynes? In favor. And Mr. Overfeld? In favor. Motion passes unanimously. Item 11C.
Yes, Mr. Mesa. It is a recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve the memorandum of understanding and authorize the superintendent to sign the memorandums of understanding as presented.
We've heard the recommendation. I'll ask for a motion for approval. Mr. Contreras, seconded by Mrs. Gonzalez. Mr. Contreras, your vote? For. Ms. Gonzalez? For. Mrs. Webb? For. Mr. Smith? Favor? Amy Haynes? In favor? And Mr. Orfeld? In favor. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Ms. Lana Talamantes, actor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mesa, Superintendent and Board members. Just as we say in Cardwell, when we do a good job, kiss your brain. That's how I like to conclude. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I know the parents are missing all the training and all the work that they do there.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item that we have, Dr. Rios.
Mr. Mesa, if it pleases the board, if we can go back to item 10C, I can make the presentation without the slides.
Okay.
Item
10C.
It's only for discussion anyhow. There's no action. Mr. Mesa, as you know, as a TASB director, TASB advocates for the needs of the schools and the students, and it reaches its advocacy agenda by first considering what's decided at the grassroots level. Not last semester, a few months ago, you and Ms. Webb attended a grassroots meeting in San Angelo, and there was various grassroots meetings held throughout the state, and board members and superintendents got to express some of the priorities. So that formulates part of their advocacy agenda. Another part that contributes to the advocacy agenda is the contributions of resolutions by local board members. We have between now and June to come up with our own resolution. So board members can consider the resolutions that they believe to be interested in. We'll certainly write some ideas in the board update. But what I, as a superintendent, would encourage our board to formulate as a resolution is that if we consider the current situation we're in, they have already waived the A through F accountability system for this year. I would encourage the board to draft and approve a resolution to submit to TASB requesting that the A through F rating be removed for 2 years following this year, primarily because it would be, one, students missed a whole lot of instruction. So if we consider the amount of learning that has to take over just to make up for what students lose over the summer, well, now we have to consider everything that they've lost from March all the way through the present, particularly as it relates to reading. And there's certainly going to be some ground to be made up. The other part is that because we don't have testing this year, it's going to be very difficult and confusing to come up with a way to measure student growth. So I would encourage our Board of Trustees to direct the administration to draft a resolution specifically asking our legislators to suspend accountability, at least in the A through F rating, for 2 years past this year. Again, there's other areas where we can draft resolutions, and we will include these in the next board update. But the recommendation from administration has to do specifically with accountability.
Thank you, sir. And I just wanted to advise the board that we do have lots of good information in your packet. The process is lengthy, but it's important that we address every area of concern. This is how the governmental relations work with our elected representatives in trying to pass legislation that will address the resolutions that we come up with. You have until June 17th. The deadline is June 17th for resolutions. So this is an item for discussion, but I think it's a very important item. The students have lost a lot of instruction, and it's certainly a worthwhile resolution to look at. So again, we have plenty of time, but I think we should draft a resolution and by all means submit it in a timely manner. I thank administration for putting the work together in regard to the application for or the submission for resolutions. That was a discussion item. Next item that we have is item 12A, consideration to approve the competitive seal proposal method of construction and bid criteria as a procurement method for the Del Rio High School Dining Commons renovation, and authorize the superintendent to request bids. Is this Mr. Hingate that's gonna do this for reviews, or are you gonna do this?
Yeah, I'm gonna take care of them, Mr. Mesa, just in the interest of time. Item 12A has to do with the Del Rio High School Dining Commons area. All we're asking for approval is that the board allows to proceed with the competitive seal bid proposal. There's different ways of procuring services, but our district has always used a competitive seal proposal. We believe it's the best system for the district to use. Now, part of the requirement is that we also outline the criteria that's used to evaluate the contractor submitting a bid. We included the criteria in the board update. I'm also sharing it here on the screen. Mr. Mesa, are y'all able to see the
Yes, sir.
The screen? Well, in essence, all we're asking is that y'all approve for us to use a competitive seal proposal and this particular ranking criteria that's up on the screen as we move forward with receiving and evaluating bids for the high school commons area.
So this is the rating criterion.
Yes, sir. We would base 60% of our decision based on the construction cost, the lowest cost. Of course, we're assuming that everybody's meeting the specs that we outline in the construction documents. And then up to 5 points awarded for similar projects completed by the contractor, and on down the line as they're indicated there.
Okay. Dr. Rios, one question. This process is going to be voted on tonight for the projects that are presented on this agenda, correct?
Correct, Mr. Mesa.
And it's the same procedure for all three of them?
Yes, Mr. Mesa, the same procedure for all three items on the agenda, correct.
Okay, so we're dealing with item 12A right now. And the recommendation, please, unless you have, let me see if I have any questions from board members. No questions? Okay, I don't hear any questions, sir. Recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Mesa. It is a recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve the competitive seal proposal method of construction and bid criteria as procurement method for the Del Rio High School Dining Commons area renovations, and authorize the superintendent to request bids.
Sir, could I ask you to, if I could have my screen back?
Oh, yes, sir. I apologize. There you go.
Thank you, sir. Okay, you've heard the recommendation from the administration. Is there a motion for approval? Mr. Contreras, seconded by Mr. Overfeld. I'll ask Mr. Contreras, your vote. favor? Myself in favor. Diana Gonzalez in favor. Ms. Webb in favor. Mr. Smith in favor. Amy Haynes and Mr. Orfeld in favor. Unanimously, sir. Item 10 on 12A has been approved. We go to item 12B, consideration to approve the competitive seal proposal method of construction and bid criteria as a procurement method for the Del Rio freshman restroom renovation and authorize the superintendent to request bids. Dr. Rios?
Yes, Mr. Mesa. It is a recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve the competitive seal proposal method of construction and bid criteria as a procurement method for the Del Rio freshman restroom renovations and authorize the superintendent to request bids.
Any questions? Same process, different project. You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion for approval? Mr. Contreras, second. Mr. Orfeld? All those in favor? Mr. Contreras? Favor? In favor. Diana Gonzalez? Mrs. Webb? In favor. Mr. Smith? In favor. Amy Haynes? In favor. Mr. Orfeld? In favor. Unanimously. Item 12B is approved. We go to item 12C. Consideration to approve the competitive seal proposal method of construction and bid criteria as a procurement method for the Buena Vista Elementary School driveway expansion and authorize the superintendent to request bids. Dr. Rios?
Thank you, Mr. Mesa. Members of the board, it's a recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve the competitive seal proposal method of construction and bid criteria as a procurement method for the Buena Vista Elementary School driveway expansion and authorize the superintendent to request bids.
You've heard the recommendation from administration. Any questions for board members? I think all of us have seen the design and layout. Hearing no questions, is there a motion for approval? Mr. Overfeld, seconded by Mr. Smith. All those in favor? Mr. Contreras? In favor? Myself in favor. Diana Gonzalez? In favor? Mrs. Webb? In favor. Mr. Smith? In favor. Amy Haynes? In favor. Mr. Orfeld? In favor. Motion carries unanimously. Item 12C is approved. We go to item 13A, Business and Finance, consideration to approve food service agreement management company for the RFP 20-15 for submittal to the Texas Department of Agriculture. Amy Childress.
Good evening, President Mesa, Dr. Rios, members of the school board. San Felipe Del Rio CISD initiated the process to contract with the food service management company in accordance with requirements set by the Texas Department of Agriculture through the National School Lunch Act, the Child Nutrition Act of 1966, and all applicable regulations, and the Texas Request for Proposal and Contract. The process to contract with the food service management company began with the issuance of RFP 20-15, which was released on February 27th, 2020, with a response date of April 3rd, 2020. Paula Johnson, the Director of Purchasing, received one response to RFP 20-15 on April 3rd, 2020 from Southwest Food Service Excellence, LLC. Southwest Food Service Excellence, LLC is the current food service management company for the district. They were awarded the original RFP 15-12 at the April 20th, 2015 regular Board of Trustees meeting. This contract is not effective until it is approved in writing by the Texas Department of Agriculture. The deadline to submit the contract to the TDA is April 29th of 2020. The food service management company contract will be in effect for a period of 1 year, commencing on July 1st, 2020, and terminating on June 30th, 2021, and may be renewed for 4 additional terms of 1 year upon mutual agreement between the district and the food service management company.
Thank you very much.
Mhm.
Board members, questions? Administration, can you make the recommendation, please?
All right. It is the recommendation of the administration that the Board of Trustees approve the submission of the request for proposal 20-15 to the Texas Department of Agriculture and for the superintendent to sign the required documents.
You've heard the recommendation from the administration. I will entertain a motion for approval. Mr. Orfeld, seconded by Amy Haynes. All those in favor, Mr. Contreras? In favor, myself in favor, Diana Gonzalez. In favor, Mrs. Webb. In favor, Mr. Smith. In favor, Amy Haynes. In favor, Mr. Orfeld. Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next item we have is Human Resources, item 14A. Consideration to approve the submission of the 2019-2020 Educator Appraisal Waiver to the Texas Education Agency. Aide Garcia.
We can't hear.
There. Okay, sorry about that. Good evening, President Mesa, Dr. Rios, members of the board. Texas Education Code Chapter 21.352 requires teachers to be evaluated on an annual basis. Due to circumstances related to COVID-19, principals will not be able to complete the appropriate teacher evaluation. TEA has provided the opportunity to submit an educator appraisal waiver. The waiver process requires a plan how the Texas Teacher Evaluation and Support System, TTAS, will be completed. The plan was developed by SFDR CISD committee and has been reviewed and improved by the principals and the district planning and decision-making committee. The number one goal of the committee was to make this plan very teacher-friendly due to everything the teachers are already experiencing with this pandemic. We're going to go ahead and go through the plan. A meeting was held with the principals on April 3rd, 2020 to determine the T-test components that were missing. There's three components. There's the goal-setting professional development, the evaluation cycle, the pre-conference, observation, and post-conference, also summative, and the student growth measure. So now we'll go down to the bullet where it talks about develop a plan for addressing the incomplete teacher evaluations and recommending contract actions for employees. First of all, if a teacher was hired during the first semester and the goal setting, the part one, was not conducted, the evaluation will be waived. If a teacher was hired after the first semester and the goal setting part one was not conducted, then the evaluation will be waived. Teachers evaluated under the less than annual appraisal, these are the teachers that are exempt due to their performance, will continue to process and complete the appraisal with only the goal setting professional development component. Teachers will still qualify for the less than annual appraisal, which is this exemption, based on the 2019-2020 rating as determined by our local policy DNA local. If a formal observation and post-conference was conducted during the school year, then the principals will process the full evaluation and they'll continue with the process. Now, if a formal observation was conducted, however, no post-conference was conducted, this will be coupled with the summative conference. The summative conference may be completed by phone or video, and feedback from observations should be provided at this time. A second observation or second appraisal will not be granted due to the circumstances related to COVID-19. However, a request for a second appraisal that is based purely on existing data, such as the information on the goal setting professional development, would be possible and thus should be granted. The request for a second appraisal based purely on the existing data should be submitted to the Chief Human Resource Officer. Now, if there was no formal observation, the evaluation process will be waived and the teacher will only complete the goal-setting professional development. There's other components to the goal-setting professional development, which is the part 1 and part 2, and those will be discussed during the summative conference. Summative conference will be extended through June 1st, 2020. And with the suspension of the state assessment, the student achievement component will not be included in the evaluation, and the student learning objectives would also be waived. Now, all other district evaluations will be completed before the stop date as indicated in the department calendars. We did review policy DNA legal local regulations and exhibit for the purpose of this plan. DNB, legal, local, and regulation, and DN, local, and regulation. If the board approves this, this will be submitted to TEA tomorrow. Any questions on the plan?
Questions from board members? Hearing none, the recommendation, please.
It is the recommendation, I'm sorry.
Dr. Rios could read. Oh, she's going to read it.
It is the recommendation of administration that the Board of Trustees approve the submission of the 2019-2020 educator waiver to the Texas Education Agency.
You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion for approval? Mr. Smith, seconded by Mr. Contreras. All those in favor, Mr. Contreras? In favor? Myself in favor. Diana Gonzalez? In favor? Mrs. Webb? In favor, Mr. Smith? In favor, Amy Haynes? In favor, Mr. Orfeld? Motion is approved unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. The time is 8:48 p.m. We're going into closed session permitted by sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.073, 551.074, 551.076, 551.082, 551.084, and 551.087 of the Government Code Texas Open Meetings Act. If a final vote is required, it will be taken upon reconvening into open session. We're now in closed session. Okay, the time is 10:33 p.m. No action was taken in executive session. We're now reconvening into open session. We're on item 18A, consideration to approve personnel report to include the following: new hires, district vacancies, retirements, resignations. Aide Garcia.
Yes, President Mesa, Dr. Rios, members of the board, it is the recommendation of administration that the Board of Trustees approve the following personnel: Maria Solis, first grade teacher at Ruben Chavira; Rosalinda Delgado, Spanish teacher at Del Rio Middle School, 7th grade.
You've heard the recommendation from administration. Is there a motion for approval? Mr. Overfeld, seconded by Mr. Contreras. All those in favor, Mr. Contreras? In favor, Ms. Gonzalez? In favor, Mrs. Webb? In favor, Amy Haynes? Mr. Overfeld? Mr. Smith? And myself, unanimous. Those positions have been approved. We'll go to item 18B, consideration to approve the position of principal for Irene C. Cardwell Elementary. Aide Garcia.
Mr. President, I'll be making those recommendations for the principal positions. Board President Mesa, members of the board, it is the recommendation of the administration that Alana Talamantes be approved as principal for Irene C. Cardwell.
There's a recommendation. Motion for approval, Mr. Smith, seconded by Mr. Contreras. All those in favor, Mr. Contreras? In favor, myself in favor, Diana Gonzalez, Mrs. Webb, in favor, Amy Haynes, in favor, Mr. Smith, in favor, Mr. Orfeld. Motion is approved unanimously. Go to item 18C, consideration to approve the position of principal for Roberto Bobby Barrera Elementary STEM Magnet School, Aide Garcia. Dr. Rios.
Board President Mesa, members of the board, is the recommendation of the administration that Ms. Laura Sandate be approved as principal of the Roberto Bobby Barrera Elementary STEM Magnet School.
You've heard the recommendation from the administration. I will entertain a motion for approval. Motions made by Mr. Smith, seconded by Mr. Contreras. All those in favor, Mr. Contreras? In favor, myself in favor, Diana Gonzalez. In favor, Mrs. Webb. In favor, Amy Haynes. In favor, Mr. Smith. In favor, and Mr. Overfeld. Motion is approved unanimously. Congratulate Ms. Sandate. Item 18D, consideration to approve the position of principal for Lamar Elementary. Dr. Rios.
Board President Mesa, members of the board, it is the recommendation of the administration that Ms. Iris Oka be approved as principal for Lamar Elementary.
You've heard the recommendation from the administration. Is there a motion for approval? Amy Haynes. Is there a second? Mr. Overfeld. All those in favor, Mr. Contreras? In favor, myself in favor, Diana Gonzalez in favor, Mrs. Webb in favor, Amy Haynes in favor, Mr. Smith in favor, Mr. Overfeld. Motion is approved unanimously. We congratulate Iris Oka. Item 18E, consideration to approve the position of principal for Ruben Chavira Elementary. Dr. Rios.
Board President Mesa, members of the board, is the recommendation of the administration that Ms. Laura Langton be approved as principal for Ruben Chavira Elementary.
You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion for approval? Mr. Contreras, second. Mr. Overfeld. All those in favor, Mr. Contreras? Favor? Myself in favor, Diana Gonzalez. In favor, Mrs. Webb. In favor, Amy Haynes. In favor, Mr. Smith. In favor, Mr. Overfeld. Motion is approved unanimously. We congratulate Ms. Laura Langton. Item 18F, consideration to approve the position of principal for Del Rio Middle School. Dr. Carlos Rios.
Board President Mesa, members of the board, it's the recommendation of the administration that the board approve Mr. Jorge Jurado as principal of the Del Rio Middle School 7th grade campus.
You've heard the recommendation from administration. Is there a motion for approval? Amy Haynes, second to the motion. Mrs. Webb. All those in favor, Mr. Contreras? In favor, myself in favor, Diana Gonzalez in favor, Mrs. Webb in favor, Amy Haynes in favor, Mr. Smith in favor, and Mr. Overfeld. Motion is approved unanimously. We congratulate again Mr. Jurado. Item 18G, consideration to approve the position of principal for Blended Academy. Dr. Carlos Rios.
Mr. Mesa, I would like to table this item at this point for our next meeting.
Okay, this item will be tabled until our next regular meeting. Motion by Mr. Overfeld, seconded by Amy Haynes. All those in favor, Mr. Contreras? Myself in favor, Diana Gonzalez, Mrs. Webb in favor, Amy Haynes in favor, Mr. Smith, and Mr. Overfeld. Okay, this item has been tabled until our next meeting. We go on to item 18H, consideration to approve the teacher and retiree rehire contracts. Aide Garcia.
Yes, President Mesa, it is the recommendation of administration that the Board of Trustees approve the teacher and retiree rehire contracts as discussed in closed session.
You've heard the recommendation. Is there a motion for approval? Mr. Contreras, is there a second to the motion? Mrs. Webb? Mr. Contreras, the vote in favor? In favor, Mrs. Gonzalez? In favor, Mrs. Webb? In favor, Amy Haynes? In favor, Mr. Smith? In favor, and Mr. Orfeld. Okay. The teacher retire, rehire contracts have been approved. We go to item 18I, consideration to approve the non-renewal of Chapter 21 multi-year contract employee. Dr. Rios?
Mr. Mesa, it's, as we discussed in closed session, a recommendation or a motion has to be made by a board member of the
Okay.
non-renewal
Is there a
contract.
motion for item 18I?
I'll go ahead and read it, Mr. Mesa. It says,
Mr. Contreras?
I move to approve the proposed non-renewal of the Chapter 21 multi-year contract employee as discussed in closed session.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the tail end of that statement. At where, sir?
I'll go ahead and repeat it. I move to approve the proposed non-renewal of the Chapter 21 multi-year contract employee as discussed in closed session.
At the recommendation, is there a motion for, is there a second to the motion? Mr. Orfeld? All those in favor? Mr. Contreras? Myself in favor. Diana Gonzalez? In favor. Mrs. Webb? In favor. Amy Haynes? In favor. Mr. Smith? In favor. And Mr. Orfeld? Unanimous vote. That was item 18I, non-renewal of Chapter 21 multi-year contract employee. We go to item 18J, consideration to approve the non-renewal of Chapter 21 term contract employee. Is there a motion?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mesa. I'm going to go ahead and read it. I move to approve the proposed non-renewal of the Chapter 21 term contract employee as discussed in closed session.
Okay, there's a motion. Is there a second to the motion? Mr. Overfeld? Okay. All those in favor, Mr. Contreras?
Okay.
Motion. Yes. Ms. Gonzalez?
Abstain.
I'm sorry?
Abstain.
Abstain. Mrs. Webb?
Abstain.
Abstain. Amy Haynes?
Abstain.
Abstain. Mr. Smith?
I'm staying too.
Abstain.
Yes.
Okay. And Mr. Overfeld? 4. Okay, 3 in favor and 4 abstentions. Motion does not pass. We go on to item 18K. Consider and take possible action to approve purchase of real property for new elementary school. Dr. Carlos Rios.
Board President Mesa, members of the board, it is a recommendation of the administration that the board approve the superintendent to move forward with the negotiations as discussed in closed session, and further approve the superintendent to seek alternative options should the negotiations as discussed in closed session not be approved by the seller.
You've heard the recommendation from the administration. I will entertain a motion for approval. Mr. Smith? Is there a second to the motion? Mrs. Webb? All those in favor? Mr. Contreras? In favor? Myself in favor. Diana Gonzalez? In favor. Mrs. Webb? In favor. Amy Haynes? In favor. Mr. Smith? In favor. And Mr. Overfeld? Motion is approved unanimously. There being no other items on the agenda, is there a motion for adjournment? Amy Haynes, seconded by Mr. Contreras. All those in favor? Please, Mr. Contreras, in favor. Myself, Diana Gonzalez, in favor. Mrs. Webb, Amy Haynes, Mr. Smith, in favor, and Josh Overfeld. Thank you and have a good night.